This is already a dumpster fire. This is so awkward. Okay. So the reason...
What, bro?
No. So the reason that I had to fix the cloth. Try it. Dude, just drink it. Just drink it.
Clonakilty is a distillery located in the southwestern part of Ireland. When we went to visit, we didn't just go to chug whiskey at the Rick House, we tried to experience as much as possible. Right on the coast is where Clonakilty has their acres of barley, growing while getting splashed with the sea salt air after the waves crash on the cliffs. I mean, just look at how beautiful this place is. Would you ever want to leave? After spending some time wandering the barley fields and literally living our best life, we decided to head over to the actual distillery to talk with real professionals on how it's made.
So basically we milled in 60-40 barley and malt. Comes from the mill above upstairs, which is currently milling for tomorrow's mash. It comes down through the pre-masher here where we add our water and our grist together. That comes into our MCV. So then we have 3 set ramps that will go to 64 degrees, 70 degrees, and at the moment it's going up to 77. We'll say at 77 degrees for approximately 1 minute before we transfer into our lauter tun. So that's where basically we're trying to separate your barley and your malt and get your sugary water, which is your wort, that will go into your wash back.
Gotcha.
So basically in the lauter tun there's like a sieve, and basically it will separate the two products. This is our malted barley, or our malted. So basically with the malted barley, that's the middle after starting up there now. So you can see it's gone smaller, it's stem after coming out from the germination. And you can also, what I find is you can actually crack it, because it's dried out. Whereas with your malted barley, with your one malted barley, it's that bit thicker and it's not dried out, so you actually can't crack it. That's the difference between them. That's how you'd spot it if you were to find out. So there's a little bit of a difference. So once it goes through the mill, and we call it grist, and this is what a grist is. So basically it's your barley ground down, and that's what we bring into our MCV downstairs.
So now we're on to step 2.
Yeah.
So can you run us through your step 2? Just because again, this is an Irish whiskey, so it might be a little different than what we're used to back home, where there's a little bit more corn involved from where we're from.
Yeah, so basically in our product here it's just barley and malted barley. So basically the lauter tun, all this is to separate your grain from your liquid, because all we want is our liquid going into our fermenters. So it's a big sieve, The
Okay.
liquid falls through and the grain will stay on top. So we call that our spent grain, which we will take that out, we put it into a trailer out back, and we actually use it as a animal feed. So it's actually not going to waste, it's being used for animal feed.
So all that spent grain is taken out,
Yeah.
and then from there the remaining.
We have basically your wash that goes into your wash backs. We also add sparging water into this tank as well, just to add up an extra volume of liquid for your fermenters. So basically all I'm doing is adding the dried yeast into our wort, and this is the sugar will react with your yeast, which will cause your beer, which we're going to use then for our wash still in 3 or 4 days time. So once we finish our fermentation, we'll be adding the wash backs into our first still, which is our wash still. Basically all we do is go in here, leaders to be loaded, 7,200, go into our settings, wash pot still load, we reset and reload. So basically this is our wash still, obviously made from copper. Reason they would have used that before is it was easy to shape, but also it takes out the sulfate. We have a long neck. The reason for our bowl in here is to collect the ions so it doesn't go up into our spirit. It comes back down and back into our product down here. We have our line arm and then into our condenser, and this is where our vapors turn into a liquid. We have little tubes that run up and down, maybe 50, 70 little different tubes. Cold water goes through it and our vapors then turn into a liquid. This is where our spirit comes out, goes down and around and down into our receiver below. We call this our low wines. So basically we run that from 35 plus down to 3%, and that's when we turn off our wash still. That's our wash still process. So basically we do 2 wash stills to get our faints. So we have our faints running at the moment. It's the same thing. You load into your faints, you heat it up, and we run that at 49% on your steam control valve, and we leave it at that all day. And basically, once we're finished with our faints, we're collecting basically for our spirit tank. So this is our faints or our middle still. So we make 2 wash stills to get a middle still. We load in our low wines. It will be the same process as your wash still. It comes up your long neck, the same shape, across your line arm and back into your condenser. Basically, for your faints, this is what we make to make our spirit. Once we're finished our faints, then we're on to our spirit, and that's where our final make is collected for the casks out the warehouse. So it's the same thing. We load it in, heat it up, and we leave it at, we have different temperatures. So when we're collecting our heads, we leave it at 40% of the steam control valve. When we're doing our final make syrup, we'll go up to 48%. We'll leave that until we're happy with our final make. Then we go back to our tails, and we'll move our control valve up to 55 degrees, and we'll run it down until it's down to 3%. And that's basically our spirit. So this is our spirit still. This is where the magic happens. It's the same process again. We heat it up, we create our vapors, comes up our neck, and it goes across our line arm and into our condenser. Our line arm actually goes up at an angle. This is so that the liquid has more contact with our copper to create the copper sulfate, which in a result gives us our flavour in our final make spirit. So it comes down into your condenser, the exact same thing, through all the tubes and out through as your liquid from here. So this is our spirit safe, or a replica of a spirit safe. These would have been brought in back in the 1800s because there was a tax law from the British brought in that only the taxman was allowed into the spirit safe to stop us distillers from robbing the spirit basically. So we have 3 bowls. The first one, which is your faints middle still, goes through your bowl and down into the receiver below. The other 2 bowls, this is your spirit still, your hearts and your heads and tails. So we run the spirit still first, we collect some heads. Basically there's a bit of methanol in this, so we don't want that in our spirit, our final make spirit, because it's not good for us basically. So after we collect a certain amount of heads, we'll turn the nozzle and start collecting hearts. Hearts will start roughly around 80 plus, 81 plus %. We run this down until we have to start tasting it. When we start noticing the final spirit starts tasting hot, spicy, and maybe a taste of boiled vegetables, we know then this is when we turn back to tails. We collect the tails in for the rest of the day, which we reuse back into our next spirit still. So this is basically what we use to get our ABV of our alcohol. So we have a hydrometer and we have our temperature probe. So basically what we do is we'll just get our temperature, which is 18 degrees, and we'll get our hydrometer reading, which is currently at 59.2. Basically we just come to our tables and we'll get our, it'll just give us our ABV basically of our liquid. So basically 18 degrees, 59.2, so it's 80.8% alcohol percentage. So this is how we get our alcohol percentage before we send it out to the warehouse. We have to do all our records correctly because of Irish revenue. So this is what this is used for.
So what do you put it in the barrel at?
So it differs, but it's normally between 80% to maybe 80.5, 80.6. So it's roughly, that's a rough estimate. It does change depending on temperature of your alcohol.
Gotcha. So it's 160.
Yeah, so 160 proof, it enters a barrel.
Yeah.
And what's in front of us right now is 80% ABV.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is funny because most of our audience is going to be hearing this and they heard 80 and they think it's 80 proof, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's literally double.
Double.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Excellent. Well, let's try it.
So this is finished, right?
This is
just about to go to the brick house?
So exactly. So basically what you'd call this is a moonshine in America, or in Ireland we call it poteen. So basically we just swirl it, you see the oils coming down the end of the glass, and this is what we do to make our cut when we're going from our hearts to our tails.
Gotcha.
So we're looking for a flavour. So this is final mix spirit, so this will actually be a nice flavour, it'll be quite smooth. No, it is 80%, so it might burn them out, but it's quite tasty. So we can have a sip of that. So you probably feel it at the back of the throat. It's almost hard to breathe. But yeah, it's quite a nice sweet flavour.
Very sweet, yeah.
Quite fruity as well. I think
is.
that's because of the yeast they use here. It brings out a fruity flavour. And
Wow.
yeah, so it's quite nice for a poteen basically.
And is this a 60-40?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, this is. So yeah, that's what we're actually making right now.
So good.
So 60 malt or unmalt?
So that'll be
60 malt, right?
Exactly.
Yep, so 60 malted, 40 unmalted barley.
Correct.
And it's
Which is your flagship mash bill?
Yeah.
very fruity.
Yeah.
I was surprised by that.
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah, it's quite tasty. Yeah.
Mhm.
So you can imagine what it's going to be like in 6 years' time.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
interesting tasting stuff like this because you don't expect it to be good. And then you sip it and you're like,
and,
oh,
well,
okay, I can
yeah,
drink this.
there's a big difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's very grainy,
Yeah.
which is nice.
it is grainy. Yeah.
Because it offsets the fruit, but the ending note of the entire spirit
Yeah.
is all grain, and it's so fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah. It
That's
is.
that's my favorite part about it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting for everybody, if you get the chance to go and have something right off the still or their finished product before barreling,
Yeah.
it's interesting to taste that and then taste it when it's done because
it's
then you know how much the barrel impacted.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
It's,
So it's a cool experiment to do with yourself.
yeah. The barrel really does bring the characteristic into the whiskey, like you know. But yeah, as you could taste there, it was quite smooth as well. It didn't. So what we're looking for when we're doing the cutting is that'll get quite hot. It'll burn your mouth quite much more, and you'll also get a vegetable flavour.
Gotcha.
Sure.
So that's what we're roughly looking for when we cut it. There's not a few bits and pieces, but we won't tell you that.
Yeah, really. Cool.
So yeah,
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
no problem.
Cheers. Hit that.
Appreciate it. Thank
No
you.
problem.
Cheers.
Okay guys, you are very welcome to Clonakilty Distillery. My name is Donna and I will be bringing you into our working distillery, onto our cask room, and then the best part of the tour, you can all have a few drinks.